Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison,
My name's Brandon Bonner.
and we'll be your host. All right, welcome back. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about social media and how social media could be impacting our spiritual life, the formation of our soul. So I've got 6 different talking points, Brandon, that I wanted to talk about. And I think it was last week, maybe. I just sometimes give you stuff, and you've never seen it before.
Yep.
So I'm always interested to.
Today's one of those days.
Today's one of those days to see how it goes and what your thoughts are on it. And we're in a series of just talking about basically our entertainment. We've talked about different movies and performers and that kind of thing, and so this naturally flows into this topic of social media. And I feel like I beat social media to death, but I don't think that I talk about it enough, actually, because it is such a pervasive thing in our world today. And here's the scary thing. It's not going away anytime soon, and I think it's only going to continue to grow, especially with the development of AI and its rapid improvements and just everything that technology is to us today and where that's headed. So the first topic or talking point that comes to mind is whether or not God's word or our social media is shaping us more. And so I wanted to discuss how the constant exposure to social media, how it forms or shapes our desires, shapes our identity, our fears, just, all of that stuff goes in, who we are, personality even, our attitudes, how we interact with our family members. I think a lot of times is a hidden thing in social media that you may be scrolling through stuff and the algorithms have they know what you're wanting to see or maybe not wanting to see. And, it puts you in a bad mood or something. And so it ends up affecting, how you relate to your wife at the end of the day or whatever.
Right.
So what are your knee-jerk reactions to that?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. I can't exactly remember. But, we talked about how much the things that we consume shape us. And so I think social media is no different. Like the content that we're consuming is going to shape our thoughts and have influence over us, whether we intend to or not. Both good and bad things on social media is going to have influence over us. So I think, step one's awareness, like how much is social media shaping me? And I think the first thing that we have to think about is how much time am I dedicating to social media? Kind of a newer trend, that came out of COVID was doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Just constant scrolling, like TikTok, I think is kind of amplified that a lot because it's just video, scroll up,
Right.
video. So you can spend hours and hours and hours and hours just spending time on various social media platforms. And it's built, let's not forget, it's built to engage you.
Sure.
It's built to attract you and make you want to stay on the platform. That's how they make money and draw in revenue. And so I think awareness is step one, like how much time. And there's, obviously we all know about screen time and tools on our devices that can help us monitor that. But just a self-awareness, I think, is step one of, how much time am I spending on social media? Maybe the stuff on social media I'm consuming is not inherently bad. Maybe it's good stuff. But still, any time that you dedicate a significant portion of your time to consuming any sort of media, social media, movies, music, anything in between, it's going to have a pretty significant influence on you. And you have to think about, what do you want to influence you? Do you want it to be social media, the content that you see out there, your algorithms, or do you want it to be something more eternal?
Yeah. I'm in the process, whether or not I ever get it published, I'm in the process of doing research, writing a book about social media specifically, primarily influenced by another book that I read called The Opt Out Family by Erin Lochner. And was a she had a massive following on social media. Her husband worked in Silicon Valley, and she was seeing some real concerning things. And so basically, she got rid of all of it. She walked away from a massive amount of followers and all of that kind of stuff to write this book. And basically, she had to reprogram her entire family for that. And so I'm kind of piggybacking off of some of the work that she did. And in my research, I have found some really insidious things that I don't know if I've mentioned on this program before. But you talked about the doom scrolling and how that became a thing during COVID. So there's internal documents that I uncovered with, in particular, Instagram, but there's others that I'm not going to disclose at this point because I can't. But there are internal documents that the public can go and look at, and they hired a team of people, experts in their fields, to create. And I'm struggling the word, but it's basically the interaction between human and machine. So your cell phone, and the whole refresh motions, like when you pull down and let up, and you get that little chirp. The documents that are there talk about how the slot machines in Las Vegas wire our brains and release dopamine. When you pull down the slot, even so much as the motion, the feel, the sound, all of that is to keep you engaged, to keep pulling that slot down over and over again. And I was blown away when I discovered that the people who are designing the algorithms, who are designing the interface between us and our technology, is designed around the same thing that the people in Las Vegas and the slot machines and the whole gambling world is wired. Is you pull down that refresh, and you get that little chirp, and it beeps back up. It's designed after the slot machines. So there's real thought behind this stuff, and it's not good. It's insidious, and it pulls us in.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard that before. That's not surprising, or I think our devices, technology, has always been from the first computers to make us more efficient, more effective. And you think about the introduction of the smartphone, like it's all for information access and making life easier and more simple. And so when you think about social media, it's about bridging connection and introducing folks to each other, or staying connected. Mm-hmm. And then you start to get kind of this new age of content creators and content creation, and the platform makers want you to go to their platforms and stay on their platforms so they can generate. I mean, it's all money.
Money,
It's
right?
about money.
Revenue,
Yeah,
right?
So it's not super surprising that there's psychological things that are built in that we may not even recognize into social media that is going to draw us towards it.
So, thinking about that, then I think as Christians looking at this and trying to navigate it, we need to be perhaps more aware of just how deeply that could be impacting and shaping us, our specifically our social media and the time that we spend on it. And so I think the question comes then, how much time are we actually spending doing godly things versus how much time are we spending in our social media universe? And that can be a very personal thing, but I think as Christians, not running from this, but rather looking at it in a realistic picture and asking yourself those tough questions. Do I dedicate more time scrolling on social media on things that may not be, they're not bad or anything? It's just a lot of time dedicated to something that in the scheme of things doesn't really draw you any closer to God.
Yep.
And so I think that for me, that's the takeaway. Do you have a different takeaway?
No, I mean, I think that's definitely the emphasis of what we should be thinking about is how much time are we committing to social media. And I don't think that we should. I think there's a lot of good things that can come and sometimes do come from social media. So I'm not of the camp necessarily of like delete it all, even though I've done that, but delete it all and don't use social media at all, I think there are good things that come from it. We think about connections and outreach, and I mean, what we're doing right now would not exist
Right.
if it wasn't for social media. So,
And that's the irony in this. I'm going to post this to social media.
right.
And I've thought about that. And for me, though, so from content creator, you mentioned content creators, and not everybody is, but we're in this weird world where it seems like everybody wants to get that post that becomes viral or get recognized or have some sort of recognition. And because we've had we've had for the last, I don't know how many years, a platform that enables people to do that. That's become kind of the standard in the social media world. All the college students I talked to, they literally thought that becoming TikTok famous or becoming Instagram, having thousands and thousands of followers on Instagram, that was actually a thing, that was something that they desired to have happen. And there was an actual feeling of like it's wrong, or there's something wrong with you if you are not well known. And as far as wait, you mean, how many followers do you have? Only 100? Wait, and so there's this almost like a sin of obscurity, where we live in a society today where there's something wrong with you if you're caught in this realm of obscurity where nobody knows who you are. And that definitely has translated over into everything. I mean, I look at it even from a spiritual standpoint, where it seems like, different speakers and evangelists and stuff need to have this platform where they have some type of notoriety. So it's a thing that I'm really concerned about, that it's captured that piece of our humanity, our ego, our pride. Years ago, I read there's a lot of people that will be familiar with Nicholas Sparks. He's an author. Lots of his books have been turned into movies. It's like one of these kind of romantic writer kind of guys. And he writes in the acknowledgement section of, I think, one of his first few books, it could be The Notebook, to his agent, who, her name was Teresa, it still is, she's still alive, Teresa Parks, and he says, "Thank you for plucking me from obscurity," as if that's a bad thing. And that's where we're at with this whole stuff is, it's not cool to be obscure. You got to be somebody. If you're not somebody, then it's it's who are you? What's your self-worth? What's your identity if you're not somebody?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a component. I think that I don't know. And maybe this is a personal thing, and some of the peers, I've never felt that pressure, or I've never picked up that my peers feel like my generation feels the need to get famous on social media. I think really, and this could be stage of life, post college, post high school, but it really is the time consumption. It's a pastime. It's like a reaction. You look next time you're out in a social setting, and there's a moment, we all know, like an awkward silence or like not much to do. Everyone pulls out their phone.
Yeah.
It's like a security blanket. Like, okay, I don't know what to do now, so I'm just gonna pull out my phone and start
Yeah.
scrolling. And that has eased our social anxiety because we're having something to do. And so I think that's, to me, from what I've seen of my peers and generation, that seems to be the biggest risk for us spiritually. I know I'm not going to get TikTok famous or Instagram. I'm not trying to. I don't think any of my friends or folks that I interact with on a daily basis of the Gen Z generation are really driven by like, I need to become famous. I think it's more along the lines of like, this is something I'm going to always do. That's my security blanket.
Yeah, I think you definitely age out of that. I'm talking, when I was doing surveys and reading the surveys and the statistics on it, it's the college age group, really high school and college age group, where their expectation is to become like they all believe that that's something that they're going to achieve, when the fact of the matter is very few of them will.
I could see that.
But you bring up an excellent point in that how pervasive it's taken over our interactions with each other, where if there is this pause or whatever, and you see it in restaurants, you see it
Yep.
at stoplights.
Hmm.
People can't sit there and just, watch the stoplight. As soon as they're stopped, they pull out their phone. And I have watched that repeatedly, especially I've seen it this week even. I had to honk at a person because the light was green and they were sitting there on their phone. And it's like, what has happened
Yep.
to society where we can't spend 60 seconds without a phone in our face?
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a big issue. It's kind of ironic. Like social media was, I think, originally designed for us to be more socially connected, and in
Right.
some ways, it's actually made us less socially connected because in physical interactions, we default to, okay, I don't know what to talk about now. You're out to dinner with your wife, someone you should have plenty to talk about with and know very well, and next thing you know, you're scrolling on your phone because that's maybe, I don't know, your default. What do I do now that the conversation's over? I don't know. It is interesting how we have defaulted to using this in social settings.
An interesting observation. My wife and I, this is going back a few months. We were at, what's that steak place? It's not Logan's.
Texas Roadhouse?
Texas Roadhouse. Thank you. We were at a Texas Roadhouse, and I'm not going to say that neither one of us don't pull out our phones like as we're sitting there and waiting for our order to come through. I mean, most of the time we're talking, but sometimes we do. But I noticed that the elderly folks in the restaurant, for the most part, were sitting there in silence, but they didn't have their phone. Like they were okay to sit in silence and just be in the presence of one another. But everybody else, they had their phones out. Families, kids, all of them. And one of the things is, this is stupid. I know it's stupid, but one of the crazy things, because coming from a safety background, we had to measure noise levels. And so I was always kind of curious to know like what the noise level in restaurants would measure today on a decibel reading versus what they did before phones became a thing. Because I remember restaurants being way more noisy than what they are today. And I don't know. That's just a little side tangent. So
I feel like Texas Roadhouse is the loudest restaurant.
it is loud.
So
There's
maybe not that
there's
one.
definitely caveats to that for sure. All right, a third thing that I've got here is basically talking about comparison culture and identity insecurity. So social media, it often fuels envy, and it fuels insecurity, and there's this performance-based worth. And so the question I've got is what's really at work here? What's really going on?
Yeah, I think this one maybe is more relevant to maybe my peers,
Yeah.
Gen Z, but post graduation, is the risk when we're on social media and we're gauging. Again, maybe it's nothing's wrong with the content, but you're seeing these folks that are going on these extravagant trips and living in these extravagant homes and having these nice things, and you're like, man, that's where I'm supposed to be at. I'm the same age as them, and look at the life that they're living. And so I definitely think the habit to compare ourselves and kind of performance-based worth, like, am I ahead or am I behind? I've heard that a lot recently. Like, I feel like I'm behind, or I need to get ahead, or I'm behind all my peers. Like, our reference is so skewed because, again, social media, if you're posting content on social media, you're going to post the good content. Like, if you're a married couple, you're not going to post you guys duking it out or have, through the rough
Right.
times, right? You're going to post the good times. And
Right.
if you have kids, you're not going to post the videos of them just not behaving and causing a ruckus. You're going to post them behaving well in the good times. And dogs and houses, they're going to post them as clean. I mean, everything is an aesthetic. It's supposed to look a certain way.
Right.
And that's what attracts us to those videos. And then we start kind of getting into the habit of like, oh, I need to be at this level. I'm not here. And so what sacrifices are we making? Are we taking away from a spiritual aspect, thinking we're behind, if that makes sense?
It does. It's all staged. Like we're staging our lives. And I can go back 20 years, 30 years ago and going over to somebody's house to eat. You know that they cleaned up their house and their house looked nice, but that wasn't in your face 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Where now I can take that same couple but they're posting stuff, and it presents this stage picture of, wow, man, their life is always so put together and mine's not.
Right.
What does that say about me?
Hmm.
Galatians 1:10, talks about whose approval are we seeking? Are we seeking man's approval or God's approval? And I know, and if there's women listening, they're like, of course I'm going to clean my house before guests come over. That's not really what I'm talking about, because you put your
Sure.
best foot forward. You want your house to not be a disaster when people come. But if it's an all pervasive kind of thing, which I'm saying that today with social media, it kind of has become that thing, we're in some not too great territory, because we're, I think, then leaning towards seeking people's approval rather than God's approval.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know where this has come from, this sense of insecurity of like, this is where I should be by this age. And I think probably what you're going to see a little bit from my generation is things are expensive. It's hard to acquire assets. They're expensive. Everything's really pricey.
Yeah.
We can talk about the affordability crisis. I think that is probably going to play a pretty significant role when we think about social media and in comparison culture being a pretty big risk for our spiritual health, right? Like constantly comparing yourself of this is where I should be, so I'm going to work late, go to work early, sacrifice time with my family, not study scripture because I need to try to get ahead. And what are we sacrificing? Maybe from a giving standpoint, I don't need to give this much because I need to get ahead. And then when I get to this point, I'll give more. There's so many spiritual implications, I think, that can result from, quote unquote, the affordability crisis, my generation, and then social media putting folks around the same age that you don't know the full backstory and how they've acquired these things. And then you kind of get in this bad habit of comparing yourself.
Yep. And also, you're going to have those outliers too. Like
Right.
to your point, I mean, they could have, had a huge inheritance or whatever.
Right.
I don't know who said it. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it is so true. So true. Because when we start comparing ourselves to others, it's just like, what are you actually trying to do? And why does that even matter? Like, you do the best that you can, and that's all that should matter. You work to please God and not man. That's all that should matter. Who cares who's got more stuff? Because it's, you're not taking it with you when you die.
Yeah, let's not forget. I mean, the apostles, like if you looked at the life of apostles and when you think of worldly possessions, it probably would not have looked very attractive. I mean, it definitely wouldn't have looked very attractive.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's not the biblical example that's laid out in terms of like, these are places you're supposed to be. I mean, the apostles left their homes. They didn't have a place to lay their head. They were nomadic basically with Jesus.
Yeah. And two, if we are comparing, it's just funny how fickle we are as a society. Like if you honestly compare just your average middle income, like almost living paycheck to paycheck kind of thing, but they're not, they've got food on the table. And you compare that to like people in the past. Like I think about Elvis Presley, and he was like the top of the top, but you go tour his Graceland home and you're like, this isn't that great. Like we have nicer things than Elvis Presley ever dreamed of having in our homes right now. And you could even compare that to like royalty back, you go back ways. I mean, just indoor plumbing, like is such a luxury compared to how kings and queens lived back in the day, where it's just like, it's insane how much stuff we have today, how luxurious we actually live. You've been on enough mission trips with me to understand this probably better than some who've never traveled out of the country. And one of the things that we always notice when we go into these places, that they have literally nothing. Like their whole house would fit in your laundry room.
Right.
And they are so happy.
Mm-hmm.
They have so much joy. Like they wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yep.
And we come back to all the stuff that we have, and we're miserable. Mm-hmm. It's just a huge lesson right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one I've got as far as a talking point here: curated selves versus authentic discipleships. Are we building a platform or pursuing holiness? and this one again, I mentioned this a little bit. This is especially relevant to me, and I've got a little bit of a gripe here, and I'm not singling anybody out, but I've noticed from um, the spiritual side of things, there's these speakers that have these platforms that go and they go to different churches or whatever, and there's so much emphasis on putting that on their social media feeds. And again, I'm not knocking anybody in particular, and if you're listening to this and you are one of you're a speaker, it's probably not about you. I'm talking about people that you probably don't even know. And this goes back to, the televangelist. That's my period, my generation of these spiritual leaders, religious leaders, who are just standing on this platform, and they're making all of this money, and they've got all of this stuff, and it's like, that's just, something's wrong with this picture here. And so I wonder about this impact that the people that run in the religious circles wanting to promote themselves more than being just authentic disciples, and then what that means to the rest of the people who may be influenced by them. So I want to pose a question to you, how that would look as me being the preacher here at Central, and if all you saw me doing was like promoting my social media stuff and like just pushing it, but I was never engaged with people. It was just all about building an audience, building a platform. What does that do to your viewpoint of me as maybe a spiritual mentor?
I mean, I think my mind goes to, Matthew chapter 6. Jesus reprimands the Pharisees for being outward, right? They weren't doing it for the proper reasons. When we think about their righteousness, praying or whatever it may be, they were doing it outward public just for their recognition, not really for glorifying God. And so I think, from someone, if you were like big on social media and this was kind of your platform and you weren't intentional relationships, I think by your fruit, it'd be pretty obvious where your passions were and where your heart was. So I think it is, for your position, I think it is a risk. However, we've talked about this, I don't think on the podcast, but if you think Paul would not have been using social media to build a platform to share the word of God and share the gospel, you're wrong. I think he would have definitely used social media. If you said, hey, here's a tool where you can reach millions of people from anywhere in the world in a matter of seconds, 1,000,000% would have been using some form of platform to share the gospel. So, I think that, again, it's where your heart is, where your intentions, what are you trying to do? What's the purpose of building up this platform to share, whatever you're wanting to share, hopefully a Jesus-centered message.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to, what are you doing when you're not on social media? Mm-hmm. And I think Paul would be a good example of somebody who uses that as a secondary device, but not a primary device. His primary is probably talking to people, forming real relationships, and he's probably not going to be a guy that's got his phone in front of his face when right. There's somebody else in front of him, a real person in front of him. This other one I've got, outrage, tribalism, and the loss of Christian witness. Speaking of the Apostle Paul, how online conflict can distort gentleness, wisdom, truth, and that can be really tough to properly navigate. I have fallen victim to that, posting something that I thought was done in a very gentle spirit. It's why the whole emoji stuff came, because you can't communicate tone in written word. And so you're walking into dangerous waters really anytime you post anything on social media, because you don't know how it's going to be received. Right. And so, that creates outrage, it creates division, it creates misunderstanding. People defriend you because they've read something wrong, and it may not even be you. They just misread it. And all of a sudden they're outraged and they start this whole campaign against, you are not having to wanting to have anything to do with it, and then you lose the opportunity to witness, to be a disciple.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is something I know we've talked about a lot. I know your family's given you some hard time about, but I think it's very important. I think for as Christians, we should think very, very critically and very carefully of what kind of content we're sharing or posting online, because folks have a hard time of interpreting tone and intention in any text form. I was talking to someone about this the other day at work, and they were saying it's difficult sometimes to write an email or write a message because you might intend it to be a different tone or even receive it. Like, how did this person intend this to be received? Where, the person sent it could have no ill intent behind it, but the person read it and say, oh, this person's mad at me. Same with social media. You make a statement, they put you in a bucket, make assumptions, and so it immediately negates any credibility that you had to have the opportunity to witness to them, to share the gospel. So we definitely need to be very careful. I think especially when it comes to the political nature, I think that's probably where a lot of this ultimately goes down to. You post something that is political in any way, then you're alienating one side of the aisle, regardless. That's just the nature of it, right? You're going to alienate somebody. Mm-hmm. And again, are you doing it in the correct way? Are you building each other up? Are you approaching it, as we talked about very early on, in a way that's filled with love? I think that's all things for consideration.
Yeah, I sometimes wish that social media had not been invented, because from my standpoint as a minister, I've been called out for not posting certain things. Like, why are you not speaking out against this? Why are you not saying more about this? And man, it's such a razor's edge to walk. And I'll be honest and completely transparent. I continue to struggle. Like, there are things that I think I need to be putting out on social media. I think Paul would be addressing these issues, but I don't, just because of the pushback that I know that I'm going to receive from people who I care too much about, the closeness, the turmoil it could cause just within my own family. And so it's a real struggle. And honestly, I just get mad that social media exists sometimes because of all of that kind of stuff that comes forward. So I know that if I don't post, I'm going to have people that are going to be hugely disappointed. And I've gotten some pretty strongly worded emails because I haven't posted about stuff. And then if I do post about it, I get, the other side of that too. So right. It's just such a quagmire. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think that Satan has not had his hands in pushing this along, because he knew that it would create more chaos, more division, even though, there's great things that can come from it. It can be used as a great evangelistic tool. There's a whole lot of other stuff that comes with that. It's definitely a mixed load.
Well, and I think that with social media, my approach has always been, this is a tool for information sharing, information gathering, and connection, but it's not a tool for persuasion. I don't think it's an effective tool for persuasion. I'm not going to persuade you to think a different way by posting on my social media or taking a stance on something. But I'm going to be most effective in persuasion, if you want to use that, or trying to get a message across or get you to understand my viewpoint, probably in an in-person engagement, because there's so much nonverbal communication that you lose through posting on social media, taking a stand. So that's always been my approach. I'm not saying that's the right approach, but I think it's a great tool to gather. Well, I won't say great. It can be a good tool for gathering information and sharing information. It can be a good tool for connecting and rekindling old relationships. But I don't know if it's a great tool for, hey, here's my standpoint, here's what I believe, and you should believe it as well. It's quite ineffective, I think, actually, at that.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to be too cynical about it. Because the last point here, can social media be redeemed for kingdom purposes? I know there's good stuff that comes from that, but I see even amongst the Christian platforms on social media, the different groups that are established, that people will post things on there, and I go and I read the comments, and there's just so much bickering and divisiveness, even in a Christian public group that that people can come in. It's just like where does this end? And I just really struggle with staying positive about it. And I don't necessarily want that to be people's takeaway on this, but I think that we do need to be thinking really a lot more than what we probably are thinking about this, because I think it's extremely nuanced. I think there's a whole lot of tentacles here that are reaching into areas that we may not be realizing. And my example that I just told you is one of those things where it's like, I lose either way. I'm not posting things, and I get a lot of feedback for not speaking out on certain things. And if I do speak out, I know I'm going to get, so it's tough.
Yeah,
it really is.
It's created a weird culture that there's this feeling that I have to take a stance publicly on my social media platform because that's going to sway people to understand my viewpoint.
Well, Brandon, to your point, you mentioned the Apostle Paul.
Right.
You believe that he would be using that, and I don't disagree with you on that, but I think that it's a very complicated thing.
Right.
So.
Yep. Well, and I think really, take away from this when I think about social media, and something we've talked a lot about is self-awareness. I think is step one. Like, how am I using social media? How often am I using social media? What is the influence that social media might have on me from a spiritual, mental standpoint? So I think those are, super important things to think about when we're thinking about social media.
Yeah, good closing thoughts. We're out of time, folks, but thank you for joining us for this episode. This has been a great discussion. Didn't answer really any questions. We just brought some stuff, I think, to the attention of folks to think about. Shout out to our sponsor, Ministry League. You can see their app there. Great. Also, Central Church of Christ, who provides this room for us, and we've got another podcast that operates out of this studio after Sunday, Digging Deeper. Would encourage you to listen into that. Until our next episode, The Line, the Way, and the War, be kind to one another, love one another, and remember, the Creator of the universe loves you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Have a blessed day.